Great. I think I'll go ahead and get started here. It's 10:15, actually 10:16. Welcome. I am Brian Coulson. I work with LogRhythm Labs within LogRhythm. And previously, I worked at a clear defense contractor for the past 8.5 years, performing all sorts of IR analytics and all sorts of great stuff that comes along with cybersecurity response. My certifications, of course, are CISSP and CEH. Of course, needed for a CDC environment, if you're familiar with that at all. Okay, so agenda. I'm going to go through this kind of fast. I do have a lot of content to cover, but definitely feel free to stop me if you have any questions. We're going to cover overview of PowerShell in general. We're going to also cover logging, PowerShell and Microsoft Sysmon, threat hunting, and detection with MITRE ATT&CK. How many people are familiar with MITRE ATT&CK at all? A few people? Okay. Hunting malicious PowerShell, and also we're going to go over a quick use case using DDE exploit that occurred. All right, so Microsoft PowerShell. How many people, show of hands, know about Microsoft PowerShell? Of course, everyone does, right? It was introduced back in 2006 and pretty much on every Windows platform that there is today. So it's native within the system, it's easy to use, and also it's easy for administrators to use as well as attackers to use. So why attack with PowerShell? Well, it's installed and supported by default, like I said. It hooks directly into .NET and Win32 APIs, and executes binaries in memory, fileless binary access. This is one of the key things is that our attackers are using. Lots of attack resources as well, too. Some of the attack resources that you might be familiar with, PowerShell Empire, PowerSploit, just to name a couple. But there's a lot of frameworks out there where, of course, security researchers are developing awareness tools using PowerShell as the exploit mechanism to attack systems. And of course, those same tools out there now are available to the masses for everyone to learn with, attack with your organization, and all sorts of great stuff. So PowerShell PowerSploit. Let's take a closer look at this one. So of course, when we look at the GitHub repository, and again, this is accessible probably in all organizations and environments because it's hosted on GitHub. You don't block GitHub. It's not categorized as malicious, right? But there is malicious code existing out on GitHub. So when we look at it, let's take a look at this antivirus bypass one, right? So MITRE ATT&CK, definitely I encourage you to take a closer look at it. I'm not going to get too much into it at this time. But MITRE ATT&CK is a company, MITRE, that created the attack database, which is adversaries' tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. And it's a huge repository of great information about tools that are used to attack your environment, as well as adversaries that actually use it and the procedures of doing so. So when we take a closer look at PowerSploit, they do have database information on this. Again, it's categorized as tactic of defense evasion and technique of disabling security tools. They also give you defense guidance as well, too. So defense bypass, file monitoring, host intrusion prevention systems, signature-based detection, login analysis, and antivirus. So again, the antivirus bypass. When we take a look at PowerShell for admins, so PowerShell can be used for good as well too, and primarily that's what it's used for, to administer your environment, especially in a cloud environment, Office 365. How many people are in Office 365? Few people. Okay, but basically PowerShell is being used more and more for administrators to be able to do their normal jobs and to be able to do it through automation. You can learn more through PowerShell Defense as well too. There's a lot of companies out there doing it. You can read about it from PowerShell, the blue team information as well too. NSA has a great resource and lots of information about how to secure and protect against PowerShell attacks, as well as, of course, SANS Education. 505 is also another great resource as well too. So let's get more into logging, PowerShell and Microsoft Sysmon. So PowerShell logging. It's real easy to turn on. As we see here, I'm going through the steps very quickly. You just go through each of the settings. By default, Windows does not really log PowerShell, so you want to turn these settings on. The reason why is because as a forensic investigator, as well as for a log hunter, doing your threat hunting, you definitely need additional information as to what PowerShell is actually doing. But as you see, just a few click strokes and you're done. Now, transcription logging by PowerShell is actually a new thing. Where it's now able to actually do full transcript logging to a log file. This log file should not reside on your same system. It should be located remotely in a secured environment. Follow Microsoft best practices for that. But as you see, as soon as I launched PowerShell there, it starts recording all the activity within the log file. Again, for forensic investigations and whatnot, it's really helpful, especially if an adversary clears your log source. So PowerShell logging, the different types in there. Of course, we have module logging, we have script block logging, we have transcription logging, and of course, full script tracing. Microsoft Sysmon. How many people here are familiar with Microsoft Sysmon? A few people. Okay, so Microsoft Sysmon is an additional component that you can install to Windows environments. It's really helpful to a security analyst to be able to have this data information. When we take a look at the event viewer of Microsoft Sysmon as well as PowerShell, we can see that, of course, it's native within the event viewer here. You don't have to go outside of the event viewer. It's Microsoft's product. It's right inside. Here we have PowerShell. Here we have Sysmon. Again, really easy to view on any systems as well as to be able to collect in your SIEM environment. So now I'm going to go into a little bit about threat hunting. How many people here do threat hunting in their environments? Kind of. Okay. So what is threat hunting? Well, it's searching for threats that are not yet known in your environment. Threat hunting is threat detection. Hunting is, of course, looking for something bad. Detection is, of course, also finding that something that's bad after you've put up, kind of like the feelers to be able to be alerted on it. But it is very hard. It's time consuming. You need a lot of knowledge, and typically in most SOC environments, you don't have that knowledge, especially at a tier 1, tier 2 level. So what I'm going to get into a little bit is actually showing how I do threat hunting using LogRhythm platform. Again, you can do this in other platforms too, but this is, of course, I'm with LogRhythm, so I'll use LogRhythm platform. All right. So here we use AIE, which is our Advanced Intelligence Engine, to be able to create a scenario base where I'm looking for PSExec activity within my environment. So something that could be malicious. Here I'm going to construct a log observed rule, which is I'm going to say, okay, well, I want to look for PSExec type of activity. And of course, I can get you more detail about how to do that if you're so curious. I use Kali. I'm using Metasploit to be able to just do my quick test. I'm using PSExec module to be able to do this test. I'm attacking a test VM that I have. Of course, it's successful. I'm dumping credentials off of it. Very easy to do. And of course, as an attacker in a real world scenario, I have all sorts of credentials. Now I can move laterally and totally take over the environment. And here we're done with that. So for my AI rule that I created, it's really easy to see that on our UI dashboard is that the alarm did fire. We do have this PSExec activity detected. Over on the right-hand side, we see the event activity of the alarm card. And over here, of course, we can also now put this information into a case to be able to do threat hunting collection for forensic purposes, but also being able to share this information with other analysts. Here it keeps all history about all activity that I'm doing within the SIEM environment, including the alarm activity. We can also do tagging of the alarm activity that occurred. Here we're saying we're doing a threat hunt. We can also then pivot down more into that alarm activity to be able to say, okay, well, okay, great. PSExec was detected, but now what? I want to know more information about it. So through the dashboard and the event, we can actually see, okay, well, here's our event of activity. We see more additional information on it from the event card. We see everything from what host it is to what user it is to all sorts of great information in here that really helps an analyst get context over what is the system that was attacked. Just going through all the different things that are available in there, including known application, and of course also the domain that was impacted on there. But what I'm going to do is also, again, part of the evidence collection of the threat hunt, because again, you may be taken away, you may have to do additional searches and additional threat hunts, actually do IR work. Here, we're building a history of all the activity. So all the activity is being added into the actual case. Again, easy to review and share that additional information with. Here we're going to pivot off of that information for PowerShell that was detected. When we get into more pivoted information on PowerShell, we get additional logs back. And we see over here we also have some SYSSMON information. So we see some network activity here. Here we can type in additional information, notes about our additional logs that we found, and add them to our case. And here, this again makes it really easy to be able to share this information with other analysts, and of course also go back to if you have to get taken away to do something else. All right, so here we're going to take a look-see. In this log that we just pivoted on and see additional information, we see a bunch of code in there in the command line. We also see, again, additional context information anywhere from the user again. Also over here, we're seeing what log source type. We're seeing that it's PowerShell activity. And again, we're going to do some more pivoting to get even more context off of it. And this is a nice thing about a SIEM. You can bring in additional log information all together in one place and then being able to contextualize it further by constantly doing these pivots. So again, there's our code that we saw that was ran as a command. And over here, again, we see that where it was executed from, and also we get the hash information. So SYSSMON, one of the cool things that it has is that with process execution, it also has the hash information of that process. It makes it real valuable as an analyst to be able to then say, is this something malicious? Is this something known in my environment? Can I add this information to a list to be able to say, okay, well, I don't really care about this in the future, but right now, yeah, I'm kind of looking at it because I don't know. Again, we pivoted in. We see more information within our UI context here. We see what user actually executed this information. We see that it was administrator. So now, of course, we want to be able to say additional information about it. Again, building up the whole case. Again, it's easy to also then review as an after case method with your management team and whatnot. Here we're adding in all the logs. Again, doing more pivots because we want additional information. We want to contextualize it further. And from here again, we now have even more information that we can work with. So the more information that we have to work with in this case is we're seeing all sorts of information about like network activity, that command was used as the top parent process that also invoked PowerShell. These are all important indicators that says whether or not the environment is really compromised, or with the system is whether or not it's really compromised or not. So again, session information. So session information is actually a GUID within SYSSMON. So the GUID actually helps tie all of the SYSSMON activity together to show an analyst what exactly happened according to SYSSMON's logging activity. So again, that's an easy area that you can pivot off of and gain additional insight into your activity that SYSSMON recorded. Again, the web UI, you can put all the information out here so it's really easy to see, as well as being able to then again drill into and be able to pivot further into. And again, we're being able to see here where the session information is actually very aligned, but we get even more session informations because again, it's tracking per process. So per process activity with all the GUID information, it's going to tie other stuff together. But again, in a typical attack, you're going to have multiple sessions identified. And of course, you can filter further and of course, filter out. Again, it just makes it easy for an analyst, such as myself when I'm doing threat hunting, to be able to see, okay, well, what is this information I'm working with? And again, there's our suspicious command that has all sorts of great code in there. And again, more information as to what parent process was, the command process. All right, so that's a real quick demo overview of how I would normally go about a threat hunt with using the LogRhythm platform. So now let's get a little bit into detection with MITRE ATT&CK. So what is attack? Again, I mentioned it a little bit just a while ago. It is adversaries, tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. It's, again, a database of information that's widely available that you can Google it right now, look for MITRE ATT&CK, and all this information, it gives you context as to what is actually being used by adversaries, how to defend against it, and of course also how to build from that within your environment so you know what to protect. So let's take a closer look at Powersploit. Powersploit is within their database as well too. So when we look at Powersploit, we can use their database to be able to filter in on the techniques actually used by Powersploit. Again, giving you a focus as a company or as an institution to be able to say whether or not I need to be able to heighten my defenses against this type of attack using Powersploit. Attack detections. All right, so let's take a look at this. So we've built in some MITRE ATT&CK detections into the platform to make it easier to identify. Again, we're talking about detection of threat hunting. This is part of it. So we've identified these attacks, or according to MITRE, what is an attack, and we built up these detections to be able to say whether or not they're seen with an environment. Again, this could be benign, or it could be something important. We're going to be building off these techniques in order to build up procedures to show what is really important and whether or not this is something that you're really being attacked with. So we have multiple scripting, we have lateral movement, Windows admin shares being accessed. Now we're going to focus in on detection of scripting. So when we look at detection of scripting, we're going to look at it, what LogRhythm does is it creates a common event around this type of activity. So the AIE rule created a common event name called AIE multiple scripting. We also see that in the grid over here as well too, as well as the alarm, or as well as the event card. And over here, when we actually see that type of activity, well, what is associated with the detection of the AIE rule? We see over here that, well, it was PowerShell and command. Well, okay, that's actually interesting now. We see scripting activity. PowerShell, we expect that. Command, not so much. So again, this is something to be aware of. there's a command that was actually issued within the event. So again, makes it really easy for an analyst to say whether or not this is something more suspicious or not. Well, again, you don't have to know PowerShell encoding or anything else like that. You can see on here, wait a minute, this doesn't look like a traditional, normal red string. It looks kind of crazy. So maybe this is something I should pay attention to as an analyst. You can also see similar detections. So similar detections, we're going to look at, of course, the security event, where we see the event 4688 being created, new process created, and also Microsoft Sysmon. So you don't need Sysmon and Microsoft auditing running it simultaneously, but it does help. Again, one could catch that the other one doesn't see. But again, it's one of those things where we built the solution to be able to say, as a threat hunter, I want to see anytime this type of similar activity occurs. So similar detection details. Let's take a closer look at what Sysmon and also the security event shows. They're very similar in our environment. So we see the log source types are different. Of course, security versus Sysmon. And over here we see classification. So our MDI fabric, we've built up a common vocabulary around the different types of observations we have. So here we see for the classification is startup and shutdown. Both of these different log source types have the exact same classification, which really helps to be able to say whether or not I am looking at the right thing or not. I want to see when processes start. Do I know all the different event IDs that could be created? Do I have a list of all of those? No, by going into the classification list, again saying process startup and shutdown, you can easily see, okay, well, this is something I want to pay attention to. And here we're going to see also the common event, which is process service started. Again, there would be other common events such as stopped. And here we see the command is identical to both log source types. So here is, again, real easy to be able to say, I have all the information as an analyst to be able to work with, despite which log source type actually fed me that information. So another powerful thing then, again, that we talked about a little bit is being able to contextualize. So here in Microsoft Sysmon, again, it provides the hash information of what it observes in the process. So here we can do additional contextualization from the UI just by a click. Of course, you could also then manually pivot it if you like. But here we can just click on the actual hash, and we can also take it to something like virus total and say, what is this? And be able to get additional information. Here we see that it's PowerShell. We see that, again, there's a link to actual virus total that you can click on, and then it spawns virus total as a new tab. You can see over here, oh, look, it's PowerShell.exe. I know this is benign application, but whether or not it's benign execution inside there, that's another story. But at least I know the application itself is not malicious, and it's something I can look for in my environment as well, too. Pivoting off of IP address. So that's also another key thing to be able to use when you're doing a threat hunt. The IP address, again, we're looking at two different log sources. We're looking at, we're looking at security, and we're looking at Sysmon, and we're looking at network activity detected. And here, of course, we're getting host information. We see my Win10 system has an asterisk next to it. This means that the Win10 system is a known system that I know about in my environment. And then, of course, we see on the right-hand side of the impacted system is an IP address. It's not a known system in my environment. So now, right off the bat, as an analyst, I can say, okay, well, this is highly suspicious, and I need to look at it a little bit closer as well, too. Of course, also, we have the actual IP addresses of both systems. Also, we have TCP PCAP information as well, too. We have the port information. And just as an analyst, how many people here know what port 444 is commonly used as? No? Okay. So this is a Metasploit common listener port. It is very common out there. If you Google it and look for a port 444, by default, this is what Metasploit likes to communicate as a listener over. So again, as an analyst looking at this, port 444, I know it's kind of really suspicious, more likely Metasploit, something, again, I need to pay attention to. So the analyst investigation, we're going to look at it a little bit further. We're going to pull back all the additional logs of all this type of information about the IP address that we found. And we find, by just looking for the IP address alone, we're going to pull back information from the security event, we're going to pull back information from Sysmon, and also we're going to pull back from any other type of EDR solutions you may have in an environment, including the LogRhythm Sysmon agent, which also can monitor network activity as well, too. But again, more logs you have in your environment, the more you search and pivot off of, the more information you can contextualize and bring back and be able to search further on. Here we see all the security events listed. Here we see the Sysmon events listed. And of course, here we see the LogRhythm Sysmon events listed as well, too. So user information. Let's take a look at this. So as we drill into the security information, we also see what user was actually impacted. What user actually was the origin behind this type of attack. We see it's administrator. Why is this important? Well, we also see over here is authentication of type 3, which again, this is remote authentication, which is, okay, this is definitely suspicious. Where administrators remoting in, we have PowerShell activity, we're building up all this information in our heads, right? Also, we're building up the case information so we can logically go back to it if we need to. But again, we now know which system on here, or which user on here has been impacted, and which user we can disable. So we've already made a lot of thought process behind exactly what we need to do when we see this type of activity. So hunting malicious PowerShell. Let's take a look at this a little bit. So again, focusing back on Microsoft Sysmon Event ID 1, the key things here is that it will alert you to or create an event on any newly created process, full command line that was used to create that process, as well as the process GUID field. This is really key as to why you want to use Sysmon in your environment, because again, it ties those pieces together, and the process GUID allows you to be able to track the whole process scenario as to what actually occurred in your environment. Of course, also it provides that hash, which is really beneficial to be able to pivot off of and say whether or not you have something that you really need to be able to take action on quickly. So command executing PowerShell is one of the really suspicious activities that you may see in your environment. When we take a look at this, again, we're seeing over here the top log source. Again, we're looking at Sysmon, the classifications, we're seeing the common events, and we're seeing the MPE rule name. All this information, again, real easy to see within a UI context to be able to, as an analyst, be able to say, okay, well, is this something I need to be able to action or not? Here we get into a little bit more detail as to the type of parent process as well as the parent process itself. So we see command launching PowerShell. Again, right off the bat, visually, I see that this is something suspicious. It's not common in environment, so I want to definitely take action off of it. And here we see the command that's used. All I need to do is hover my mouse over it. Boom, I get a pop-up and I see all the information here. Again, I don't need to know PowerShell as far as like exactly what this is actually telling me at this point, especially as a tier 1 analyst. I just need to be able to know that doesn't look right to me. It just looks encoded, it looks gibbery, so that's something that's probably not executed within our environment normally. So there's a few things that we can take a closer look at over here. We see, of course, PowerShell. Now let's take a look at the commands that are being used here. So within this log, we see that PowerShell -noop-w- hidden -nani-c. We also see some additional information in here, such as diagnostic process start info. Again, we see that nani not with hidden -c again, and of course we also see base64 string. And also we see some information that's also then parsed out a little bit better in the sense of like explaining what some of these actions are at the very bottom, which is user execute equals false. We see redirect system output is true. We see window style hidden. And of course we see create new window is true. Now again, all this information in here, analysts has to spend a lot of time have to read all of this information. So it's really difficult, and plus also your knowledge base has to increase, right? So when we look at these indicators of compromise within the PowerShell log, well, we see the NOP with hidden nani-c. Well, what does that mean? Well, NOP, no profile, with hidden, hide window from user, nani, I'm probably saying that wrong, but that's how I say it anyway. Nani is non-interactive, no prompt for user, and -c, execute the following command. So when we see that kind of string put together, we see that whatever is after it, it is going to execute. Where's it executing? In memory. So again, this is something that some EDR solutions will totally miss, antivirus products will totally miss, because again, PowerShell is the conduit to be able to execute code, keeps it in memory for further action. New object, IO stream read into memory. So you can even add additional information into the binary that's now running within memory. You can feed it commands, you can feed it context, you can feed it all sorts of great stuff in order to continue its attack process. Again, this is all by Microsoft design. It can also be used for good for Office 365 administration. You do very similar things, but not quite the exact same way. Plus, you're not going to see a bunch of obfuscated code. At least you shouldn't. And of course, from base64 string. Again, base64 string is commonly used to contain binary type of information. So when we pivot into the PowerShell process, we see PowerShell outbound connection. This is kind of a key indicator here. Again, you're looking at all that information that we saw previously, that log file, all sorts of great data in there, but you don't know what it means. So here, by doing the context on what PowerShell is actually doing, it's doing an outbound connection. How often should PowerShell be doing an outbound connection, especially on normal end-user workstations? Probably not very common at all. So when we look at it, unknown host is also there, right? We have the IP address instead of a host name. And also we see port impacted. Let me build out some of this information, sorry. So we also see over here all sorts of stuff about the common event, as well as the MPE rule detected. Here we see over here the port host origin that is being used, as well as the impacted port. Our top host impacted, sorry, the IP address. And then over here we see the ports being used. And again, there's our 4444. So again, we know as an analyst, or at least myself as an analyst, I know all this stuff contextualized together. PowerShell outbound, port 44, not a good thing, regardless of whatever that command was used before. It's probably not a good thing at all. So let's take an analyst check-in at this point. What we know, PowerShell was used to execute code that led to an outbound connection to an unknown system. The impacted port is 444, which is likely Metasploit listener. Now question, is there a red team exercise currently taking place, or is this an unknown intrusion? This is something I go through when I do a lot of IR work, when I get this type of event. Is this something that I need to really like ring the bell about, or is this something that, okay, company hired a red team or group on there, I can relax, but I'm still going to collect all of this evidence and whatnot. But regardless if I find that information out, I need a decision to make, right? Is that host compromised? The key thing is, yes, it is. Regardless if it's a red team exercise or if it's an actual attacker, that host has now been compromised by PowerShell activity on there. That host needs to be quarantined off the network in order to do additional things to it if you want to, but if you know it's a red team, you don't really need to. But it does need to be blown away, because this attacker code can leave traces behind, also can confuse further investigations in the future. But the main thing here is, as an analyst, as an incident responder, this machine is compromised. That's my end result, and I need to take action on it. So let's take a look-see at traditional threat lists for PowerShell are useless. Okay, the reason why is because, again, we saw PowerShell is just text. That's all it is. It's just code within text. So again, traditional threat lists for PowerShell can't really be used because, again, this is something that's encoded, it's dynamic, it changes. The commands that are used are very common within normal environments for administering Office 365, for example. So it's just really, really difficult to use. So let's take a closer look at our use case here. So I've gone pretty fast in here, so I apologize, but at least I'm ahead of time a little bit. Does anyone have any questions before I actually get into the use case? Okay, would anyone like me to back up and go slower to anything before I get into the use case? No? Okay, we'll move forward. Okay, so use case DDE exploit. Okay, this is, how many people are familiar with the DDE exploit? No? Microsoft Office uses this legacy thing? Okay, we'll get into what DDE is. Okay, so again, going back to MITRE attack, MITRE has a lot of great information again. They also have information on dynamic data exchange. So what is it? Well, first let's take a look at what MITRE knows about it. The tactic is execution. Okay, well, that means that it can affect and possibly change how our applications are running. Let's take a look at what platform it affects. Windows. Okay, well, great. So if I get something that's a DDE exploit to a Mac, I'm not going to be that worried as an analyst, right? I can see that type of information here where it's like DDE exploit detected. Oh, it only affects Windows. The Mac user over here got it. I don't need to worry as much. But if a Windows user got it, yeah, I definitely need to pay closer attention to what's going on. Permissions required. User. Doesn't require administrator use at all. A normal user can execute this and be able to compromise the system. Let's take a look at some of the groups that are using this type of activity of DDE exploits. So again, using a MITRE's attack framework, we're over here saying, okay, well, what adversaries out there? These are nation-state adversaries, by the way. Just because this shows up here, you see PowerShell being used as your attack vector, doesn't mean it's a nation-state attacker attacking your environment. This is just what MITRE is tracking, because again, MITRE is a federally research-funded organization, and they're out there to protect government institutions and to give them guidance and all sorts of great information. So again, they're tracking nation-state actors here. But again, it gives you great information because also this tactics and techniques that are being used by these adversaries are now widely known, which means anyone learning how to attack the environment, like my young teenagers, can follow and emulate any of these adversaries and make them look like their nation state because the whole framework's there, the whole blueprints are there. It's easy enough for anyone to follow and learn. So again, it's one of those things where you just need to be aware of how they're using it. So over here, Fin 7, we see they use phishing type of activities along with PowerShell. When we take a look at APT 28, they definitely use PowerShell types of attacks within your environment. So again, we can now drill into any of those, and again, all these are drillable into the MITRE attack framework. You can drill into them and see exactly, okay, well, how are they using PowerShell? What other tools are they using? And these are all building blocks you can build up to do detections around APT28, FIN7, so forth and so on. And again, this is stuff within LogRhythm Labs that we're also going to be doing, building up the whole procedure aspect around our MITRE module to help give you further insight into exactly how you can detect this type of activity. Again, it's not necessarily this type of adversaries attacking you, but they're using those same procedures. So also within MITRE, it gives you great information as to how can you defend against these type of attacks, right? So when we look at this, we also see detection. We can also see we need to build up better detection. We need to make sure we have logs that can actually show us loading DLLs and other modules not typically associated with the application into the application, right? We need to be able to have that kind of contextualized information. We also want to be able to show what we want to monitor for. Spawning of unusual process such as command.exe. That's simple, right? So command.exe, launch PowerShell. Right off the bat as an analyst, that's all I really need to know. That's probably not good. So MITRE right here gives you real simple information of how to detect and a simple use case over there looking for command.exe. So let's take a look at the use case that we actually saw within the environment, okay? This is a phishing attempt. So the phishing attempt, of course, had an attachment, a Word document, right? So this is just an untitled Word document. Typically, you've seen these in your environment. Haven't you? Like, Word document comes in, it's a .doc, not docx, but it's a .doc, and it's just something crazy in there that says, oh, by the way, please find attached the September invoice for you to review and process your payment. Again, clickbait. It's trying to get the user to be able to open this up without notifying anyone else. It's like, well, what invoice did I get? So let's go ahead and open it up and see what happens. If you have an EDR solution, such as like Carbon Black or something like that, you get a really nice view like this, right? So as an analyst, I can then say, whoa, what really happened during this exploit? I can open up Carbon Black and get some additional information showing, oh, well, Outlook.exe actually opened up this file, or at least was the beginning part of it. We see over here that WinWord was the conduit here that actually opened up the document. And over here, whoa, we see command being spawned from WinWord. That's highly unusual. So again, as an analyst, can quickly follow the path here. Of course, also I can explain this information to other people, including management, that doesn't necessarily have a great context as to exactly how does this exploit type of thing work and why do you know it's bad. Here, visually, it shows exactly why it's bad. Command opens up, and of course, over here, what do we see? PowerShell activity. So command, PowerShell, just shows that nicely displayed. But again, there's a lot of EDR solutions that do this. But as an analyst, you don't need this type of visibility, this type of view that shows all the pretty branches. But it definitely helps to be able to paint that story. Over here, let's take a look at the process analysis again. So what was the command actually being used? Again, craziness, right? Why would you have that kind of command stuff being issued from Microsoft Word? Well, the trick is that you wouldn't, and that's actually code to be able to exploit the DDE vulnerability within Microsoft Office. So when we take a closer look at it, we see the PowerShell activity over here too. We obviously get some information within PowerShell, but basically you get the gist of it, which also one of the things about some of the EDR solutions too is they are able to decode some of the code within in there easily enough. Not necessarily the shell code, but definitely some of the commands and stuff like that to make it easier for you to be able to see and as an analyst understand what's happening over here. But over here we can see that the process analysis shows that it's actually going to pull down additional information from the internet to a specific address. This is giving more capabilities to the exploit through PowerShell. Again, PowerShell was a conduit. It has the vulnerability being Microsoft Office had the vulnerability, launches PowerShell. PowerShell has basic code instruction to be able to download additional information. Additional information will be downloaded into PowerShell in memory, again, keeping it fileless. And as an attacker, I'm just silent, and that system is going to be totally owned, and now I can do whatever I want to through PowerShell. So you want to be able to verify the malicious doc. So you want to be able to take this hash information of the malicious doc. Again, I'm using Carbon Black. I have that hash information. I can pivot to something like threat grid. Threat grid over here, right off the bat. The doc file shows, hey, that's highly malicious over there. That's all I need to know as an analyst. I have the piece that was being used in order to exploit and attack my system by a third party. Also, I have that codified. Again, I can take this information and I can pivot back into LogRhythm and put it into the case and say, yeah, I found threat grid, found it highly malicious. I can even put the malicious document within the case as well too, so that way it's all combined and contextualized in one area. So let's take a look at the MS Sysmon command line, right? So again, we're pivoting back to Microsoft Sysmon about the same activity that was observed. And over here, we see the log source type is Sysmon. And over here, we see the MPE rule, which is event ID 1, again, process execution from Sysmon. But over here, we see the command. So again, do I need an EDR solution like Carbon Black? No, not necessarily. If you have Sysmon deployed, watching all of your processes in your environment, you get very, very similar information. You just don't get that nice tree painted out within the EDR solution does like Carbon Black, but you get that exact same information. Here's the PowerShell code that's actually being used as recorded by Microsoft Sysmon. So let's take a look at this well too. We're going to see Sysmon logging, it decodes to single base 64. Again, going back to what we discussed a little bit earlier about base 64 encoding, that's also a key indicator within that's binary data within there that's encoded that's going to be executed within PowerShell memory. Let's take a look at the case that we can now create with it, right? So this actually came through a phishing incident. We have this solution that was developed within LogRhythm called Pi, which is their phishing intelligence engine. It is a very cool piece of technology that was created by a former employee, Greg Foss, but he's still phenomenal, so definitely follow him on Twitter and all sorts of great stuff if you like to. But anyway, he created this awesome solution to now be able to contextualize it further. So we've had something suspicious come in. Pi is able to do a lot of automation, including building out a case. So as it builds out the case, it adds in all the information that it's discovered, including all the obfuscated code that it detected, but also through third-party integration and stuff like that with Pi, you can also take the additional information that was provided there and pivot off of it and decode that command stream. So again, as an analyst, it makes it really easy to say, here's the raw data, here's my decoded data. Now it makes more sense. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't to you as an analyst, depending upon your skill levels. But it's something that is, again, that's automatically put into the case and makes it easy to be able to pass up to a higher tier level to be able to investigate further, or also being able to then reference when you do have time, say, okay, well, what exactly is happening in this type of command? All right, so that's it.